Oh, hey, it's Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. What I want to do here is actually, I've put a lot of thought into this. I want to make a thoughtful video and I want to be honest. I feel like, I'm going to talk about my feelings for a minute. My best videos of all time have all been when I have tried to be extremely honest about difficult subjects, or at least difficult for me. So I want to talk about what I pretty sure is going to be a banger. I know that there are strong feelings all around this topic, but that's kind of the point, and that's why I started this YouTube channel in the first place. Why not talk about it? So what I want to get to is polarization in comics. There are a lot of feelings about this. Uh, Generally, the way that it splits up is more nuanced than you might think at first. Initially, you think, well, there's the mainstream comics, and then there's indie comics, and they're diametrically opposed. Well, that's not exactly true. That's not exactly accurate, because indie comics, in and of themselves, are actually extremely polarized, and I would venture to guess that mainstream comics, in and of themselves, are actually very polarized. It's just that most of the softer spoken voices you don't hear. I've been meeting some of those softer spoken voices working in comics lately, and they do exist, and they want to pay to raise their families and have children, things like that, right? They want to put food on the table. So anyway, that's just one example, but there are some super extremes in the comic book industry, and I think elsewhere, obviously, but it's not helpful. So I have in the past, not recently, been accused of being a fence sitter from time to time. I've heard almost everybody be accused of, with that terminology once now and again, and I think that that is a fallacy uh, for one reason, depending on what exactly the issue is. But when you draw a fence right where I sit, what am I supposed to do? The best example I can have here is there's divorce. I got images here of clip art from a divorce, perhaps. Parents get divorced and they say, "Hey, little Timmy, why are you fence sitting? Pick a side." Well, that's because little Timmy had no choice in this divorce. Okay, the divorce just happened. Little Timmy was already there. Little Timmy didn't vote for the divorce. That's one example. And when you move this into comic books, this is why, and I've heard your boy Zach and Perch both make videos lately about, is comics a business or a club, so on and so on. It got me thinking about why clubs become difficult. That's because there are lines that get drawn, right? And you have to pick a side. And which side are you going to pick? Well, you have to pick a side, otherwise you're a fence sitter, and that's the worst possible thing you could be. You have to pick a side in every single falling out. The sad thing though is that in comic books, that this happens all the time. It happens in mainstream comics all the time. I was just made aware of a more recent one too that's just perplexing. Breakups in comics, and it becomes less about business and not even creatively. It has to do with whatever cooties. I don't know. It's the weirdest stuff. Should you care about this? No, I mean I don't. I don't care about interpersonal stuff. That does not make me offended. I mean, if it does, it doesn't matter. You're drawing lines, battle lines, in stupid places. Okay, and when I say you, I'm saying comic book industry. Let me show you something here. First though, I made some updates to the website. Check it out, sweetcomicsshop.com. And I added trading cards on here. You'll notice the pod campaign is closed, but I do have everything up here, including Downcast Collection 1, great way to get into the series. Downcast Collection 3, you can look at, click on it and you'll be able to see, you can change the cover and get whichever cover you want. So that's an option. Anyway, check that out. Link in the description below. All right. So I posted this and I was going to make a video on this. And then I kept thinking people are going to get mad at me if I talk about polarization in comics. But that's the point. If I can't be honest here, then why? Why do I even speak if I can only say safe things? See, I'm decidedly not fence sitting. I'm saying something and having a stance here. about not having a stance, right? This is absolutely intentional. Anyway, so I posted this question. How do you feel about the comics fandom and polarization? Notice I didn't say, I mean, you can define that however you want. I'm not saying indie comics. I'm not saying Comicsgate. I'm not saying Marvel. I'm not saying Dark Horse. None of that, Matt. Just where you're sitting. How do you see polarization in comics? The options were I like it how it is, everything how it is. Less polarized, please. You would like less polarization. You would like it to be more polarized. And then last but not least, it's not polarized. This is like, what are you talking about? This you're not accurately portraying the comic book industry. And I didn't really honestly know what to expect here, but over 56% of people said that it was too polarized and they would like it to be less polarized. Now, what is the correct, optimal point of less polarization? I don't know, but I can tell you that the majority of people want it to be less polarized than it is now. 14% said they like it how it is. 21% said they want it more polarized than it is. And 8% said it's not polarized. What are you talking about? A lot of great comments down here as well. A lot of it is like, man, if you're hanging around people that are not causing trouble, then there's no polarization. It's your perception, it's who you're talking to, which is, I think, is a good, good point of view, good perspective. Less witch hunts, though, yada, yada, yada. So let me give you some examples of polarization in comics. We're going to hit those members. So here we go. Sean Gordon Murphy apologizes for comments about police and looting. This is an example of one Sean Gordon Murphy expressing an opinion about a controversial topic at the time, real hot button issue, which was George Floyd being killed, and the police officer that kneeled on his neck was convicted of was it manslaughter or murder? It was murder, I believe, if I'm correct. Obviously, that's all hindsight. So he made this comment. He said, "I want equity. I want more good cops. I want bad cops to be held accountable when they break the law. I want people to be allowed to protest peacefully, and I want the looting to end. The solution to these problems isn't more crime." Now, if I looked at this, I would think, meh, he's probably essentially he's saying exactly what I would agree with anyway. So there were two different sides of what made people mad about this. One is that it was not a hot take. Now, personally, I think, like, why say anything at all? It is not in your hands, and you are, at the end of the day, just a comic book writer. It doesn't matter what you say. But if you're going to say it anyway, saying something that I think most people actually do agree with, here's the criticism. You're saying that because you believe most people agree with it. Well, I don't know that if that's true. If he's being honest, then what's the problem? You see my point here? If the only takes that are allowed to be spoken are hot takes and extreme takes, then what is the point? That is why comics are so polarized, because whoever is willing to speak the loudest and race to the polar opposites, they're going to be heard more, right? So in this case, because it was such a potentially all sides would want, right? It's obvious. But that's why people got upset about it, because we're all used to seeing on Twitter, incendiary comments that are going to make the other side, in air quotes, upset. Okay, so the solution isn't more crime. So that made the other side angry because they said, well, you're basically a Trump supporter if you don't want more crime. I straw man a little bit, but if you're online and you put yourself into an echo chamber, what you're doing is creating your own straw men to beat up. And when someone doesn't straw man the other side, the worst thing you can say is that you're a fence sitter. Okay, well, regardless, this is just one example. This was a while ago, 2019, December 2019, from your boy Von Klaus. He has some quotes here. He says, "Condemn who I tell you to. What's your stance? Pick a side. You're part of the conspiracy to X. If indie creators talk like this, I avoid them. They're only making indie comics just as a nasty and puritanical as SJWs made mainstream comics." So yeah, in indie comics, again, it happens in indie comics. Now, it's it's crazy to me because one of the biggest reasons why I got onto YouTube and started having an opinion, I wanted to add my voice to the discussion. That was why I started my YouTube channel. The thought of then getting into comics and having to follow some prescribed set of extremes in favor of me being honest, if that makes sense, is crazy to me. Feel like you're forced to be extreme, you know, however you are, you've got to be extreme about it. That's never been the goal of my YouTube channel. The goal has been to be honest about my perspective, and that's one of the things that I really liked and that drew me to Comicsgate in the first place, was being able to just be honest. All right, so another example here. This is some interesting. This was a blog post. It was posted a while ago. This was August 2018. This was about the time that I started making YouTube videos. Actually, I think it was August 2018, and really scathing about how terrible Comicsgate is. And then there's an update, and the update was about a year ago, and the update says, my opinions have changed somewhat since I first wrote this. I have a tendency to look at things in black and white. I'm going to pause you there for a moment. Why? Why do you have a tendency to think of things as black and white? That is exactly what the internet encourages. When you're talking about people and vast groups of people, you can't generalize. You can't. That's not how it works. So I appreciate the, whatever, said author coming to that conclusion. Something is one thing. Another, it is a dumb way to look at things. Things are almost never black and white. Almost everything is in various shades of gray. Comicsgate is no different. There are good people in Comicsgate. Some of the worst people in Comicsgate, when I wrote this, are no longer part of the movement. He goes on to list, he or she, I don't even know who wrote this, go on to list some of the worst people that left, so on and so on. And then naming terrible people like Renfamous, SJW, Spider-Man, for totally honestly forgot that they existed. I don't even know if they still exist, honestly. But again, good example of there are crazy people out there. Those are great examples. Renfamous and SJW Spider-Man, two figures on Twitter that constantly were trying to push people to become more extreme. And if you weren't taking a more extreme stance, then you were part of the problem. What this does is polarize people in comics. It's not a good thing. So last here, I want to pull up the No True Scotsman fallacy. There's a definition here that I find pretty terrible to understand by just reading it. So I don't know, do better, Wikipedia. But here's an example here. So it's an appeal to purity and commonly associated with protecting a preferred group. Scottish national pride may be at stake if someone regularly considered to be Scottish commits a heinous crime. To protect people in Scottish heritage from a possible accusation of guilt by association, one may use this fallacy to deny that the group is associated with this undesirable member or action. No true Scotsman would do something so undesirable, i.e., the people who would do such a thing are tautologically, I don't know, definitionally, that by definition excluded from being part of our group, such that they cannot serve as a counterexample to the group's good nature. So, if you are not pure enough, you are not one of us. You can't be, right? You cannot possibly be one of us unless you're pure enough. And there are other examples here, and it goes on and on. But that, again, in 2018 was some of the rhetoric that I heard often coming from, I don't know, random internet figures. Again, two good examples here, Renfamous, SJW, Spider-Man. I saw Comic Book Pros saying it, and it's the same sort of thing that pushed someone like Sean Gordon Murphy to just leave Twitter. I mean, though, I'm sure your opinions may vary. I really think that's part of the reason why, is because you're not allowed to have a quote unquote middle of the road opinion. Here's the thing though, what's more important, to have a middle of the road opinion that is honest, that is actually a true opinion? If you're being honest with yourself, that's how you honestly feel. Or is it better to feign a more extreme position? I always find it perplexing that some people that, again, I don't want to talk about Renfamous, but a good example is Renfamous used to be a right wing uh, commentator on Twitter, and she would say some pretty terrible things. I remember seeing these things floating all around. She used to work for the Republican Party, and she used to say things that, my goodness, I certainly wouldn't say. As a right winger, I wouldn't say them even. It's ridiculous, like over the edge, like embracing the straw man and becoming the straw man. And then, like a dime, she can flip and then be a left wing commentator. Now, maybe that was because she got paid to do so. Maybe that's part of the reason, but I actually doubt it. At this point, I honestly think that people are so used to being polarized, you have to accept one extreme or another. You have to be the most extreme, because that makes you a pure person and somehow more right. But is it being extreme better, or is being honest better? And if I'm being honest, I think that there's a lot of nuance in comics, and there's a lot of room for a discussion on all these matters. Anyway, so I hope I did okay on expressing myself. If you disagree, if you think I'm no true Scotsman, let me know in the comment section below. I really appreciate that. But I'm one of these people that I do think that comics is too polarized, and I don't actually think that it makes comics better. I think when I look back to times when comics were better, there was there was less general fighting when it came to comic book fans, unless it had to do with comic book content. The content of the books, I'd much rather have that as opposed to arguing over weird stuff like divorces, or creators A is terrible, creator B is terrible, creator A voted for whomever, creator B voted for whoever else. That stuff shouldn't be important. It shouldn't. Anyway, there's my stance. I'm firmly placing it down. Let me know what you think. Be kind. Thanks, and I'll talk to you later.